Hello everybody, welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. I apologize for the delay in today's episode. I had to take my co-star in for her annual checkup, and so it took me a little bit longer to get the episode out today than I was hoping for. But nonetheless, I have another little tutorial for new players in getting their first several rockets up off of the launch pad and utilizing those first few tries as best as possible. So we're going to go ahead and start a new game. This is all stock. Any of my early player tutorials from now on are all going to be stock, so that way it can be accessible to those who aren't playing with any mods. So starting off, we're going to take a look at the difference between these two capsules. However, this is the capsule we're going to use for today's episode. I think I may take another look at the other one later. This one, the Mach 1 command pod, has three variants, three little visual styles you can choose from, which is kind of fun. We'll take a look at more of that later. The Onion reentry module, which is more of a Soviet-style reentry module, it's quite fun here, but it has no other variants. There's no other visual styles you can choose from it, but it does have this thing called a blader, and that is essentially heat tolerance for coming back through the atmosphere, which is important. The Mach 1 command pod doesn't have any ablator. It has something called monopropellant, which is all about control. So you pay off, you trade off certain things here and there based on which capsule you decide. We're going to go with the Mach 1 for now. We have no liquid fuel tanks. We do have a solid fuel booster. Like I mentioned in my previous tutorial video, you can right click on the item and see a little bit of information about that. But given the fact that it is the only engine we have available, that is what we're going to go ahead and use. The engine 2 also comes with a couple different variants, but it's basically just the color of the stripe on the side. One of the benefits of having mods in your game is that you may have more access to variations on your part styles for more creativity in their design. Moving on, we have this girder segment, which you can attach things to. You can attach it radially or via one of the nodes. Good if you want to put extra things in a very neat and organized way instead of tacking them around the outside. This robotics tab here is only if you have the Breaking Ground DLC, but we have that, so it appears, but we don't have anything to put in here. A lot of these parts are going to be filled out later as we unlock science in the tech tree, but your basic fins are going to be important. You're going to want to have it in three-way symmetry at the very least. I prefer 5, but on early game rockets you really only need 3. However, where you place them can be kind of important. I like to place it, the fin that you're in control of, in the back there with 3-way symmetry, and as you see here, it leaves a nice clear spot for the Kerbal to move down the ladder. So the only other thing we really have here is the science, these mystery goo containment unit, and we can place them with the same kind of symmetry as before, but we're going to go for a 2-way symmetry and follow this nice little line right here. And we're going to actually, I'm going to get a little bit more into that later, and I'm going to change that up around pretty soon. Let's go ahead and right click on that to copy an item, and then, alt right click to copy the item. And then place it down. So now we have 4 mystery goo experiments, giving us the opportunity to collect science in 4 different locations, which is pretty nice. We're going to, these you don't have to pay attention to because that's just your Kerbal items, and you already, your Kerbal comes stock with them. But we do want a parachute on here to make sure that we can bring Jebediah back home safely, or Bob, or Bill, or Valentina. Better bring Valentina back safely. So we are going into mission control and accepting the first 2 contracts, which is to gather some science and to launch the first vessel. Now we're going to head back into the VAB, and this is under the assumption that you followed the last tutorial, and when you started your game you allowed for action groups to always be available. So we are going to go ahead and set up the action groups. If you didn't, however, that's not a problem. You can just do this the normal way in flight by right clicking on the item. So now as you see here, we're clicking on one, trying to add it to our action group, but it's actually highlighting several in the line, and that is because they were put on via symmetry. So now we can either remove them and place them one at a time, or we can change our symmetry options. However, I'm going to take the moment to remove one of those from the equation and put it onto three-way symmetry. However, where you place it is important. As you see here, we're going to be blocking the door if we place it there, and we'll be blocking the door if we place it there as well. So the Kerbal won't be able to get out of the capsule. So like with the wings, like I mentioned before, placing your item here directly on the back allows for the easy passage up the Kerbals. So now as we right click on the item, we see we only have the option to deploy, and that is not enough for us. So we're going to go ahead and utilize another one of the tips in the video where you change the settings, and the one we're looking for is down here called Advanced Tweakables, and this gives us much more control in the VAB and the Space Wing Hangar. So now as we right click it, we have several more options. The one we are looking for at the moment is Remove from Symmetry, and then that basically puts it on its own course. Anything you do to that particular item won't affect the others. So we're going to do that on another one of them. Remove that from symmetry. And then as we right click on the third one, we don't have that option because it actually isn't symmetrical to anything. All three of them have been released. If you have 4 items, then you're going to need to release all 4. But you get the point. So now we are going to add a mystery goo to each one of the action groups. So that way it is easy to hit while in flight, and we can maximize our time and efficiency gathering all of our science. And so we're going to also throw the shoot on action group 4. You don't have to. I like utilizing it. I'm pretty used to having an arm shoot function, so it feels weird not to have my parachute on any kind of action group. So now we are going to take time and we are going to adjust the thrust limiter on our solid rocket booster. And this is because I would like to minimize the amount of time spent up in the atmosphere. For this first flight, Jebediah doesn't need to go very high. He just needs to lift off of the ground and continue going. So we're going to left click on the stage that includes our solid rocket booster here down in the bottom right, and as we see here, we have our thrust to weight ratio. The TWR is 1.9. As long as it's over 1, we will be able to lift off of the craft, and that's essentially is the amount of thrust pushing the weight that it is carrying. Does it have enough thrust to lift it up? And so right now I'm going to leave it at 1.17, and then I'm going to end up throwing it out on the launch pad, only to quickly determine that still that is too much thrust and was uncontrollable. So we're actually going to just cut that out, come right back, adjust that. So now we want to remove that down there, and we bring it down to under 1, and then we're going to slowly bring it back up to just slightly over 1.01, and then as we determine that the burn time is going to be too long, we're going to remove some of the solid fuel in there, and then that way it won't burn for as long. But as you see there, the thrust to weight actually increased as well, so it went back up to 1.27. So it's actually a higher thrust to weight ratio than we had before, but it doesn't burn for nearly as long, so it works out. We're going to add a crew report to each one of these action groups because we have a Kerbal on board, so might as well get as much science as possible. So now we are all set for our first launch. Like I mentioned before, you can just use right clicks to access the science menus, but with the action groups, all you need to do is press the numerical keys to hit the desired one. So we're going to do a mystery goo observation from the launch pad. As you can see here, we can transmit it for less science than we can recover it for. However, the crew report transmits for the same amount of science, but we hit it and we don't actually have an antenna on the craft, so it's not going to do anything. I can go into the depths of how science works and the transmission process in another video if people are interested. So now we are going into the starting. We turn our SAS on, but the throttle is not necessary because this is a solid rocket booster. We don't have throttle control, so we can leave it at 0 and it will still fire. We went ahead and brought our Kerbal out on an EVA. We can get some extra science here. You don't need any special thing, but just so you know, you won't be able to transmit the science via antenna because the Kerbal just doesn't have one. It's always a good idea to take the data if you've used a crew report. Take the data out of the capsule, and you can either store it back in by pressing the Store Experiment buttons, or simply re-enter the craft if you have it on your persons. So now, without further ado, let's go ahead and launch. Hit the space bar. Like I mentioned, we don't have throttle up, but it doesn't matter. It's a solid rocket booster. And we're going fairly slowly, and that is because of our low thrust to weight. And we're not going to be burning for very long, but still is hefty enough solid rocket booster that will push us a decent amount. This helps because in early game, you're going to want to continue to go. I shouldn't have staged that so soon. In reality, that would have burnt up immediately, but nonetheless, it worked out. But yeah, in early game, you're going to want to launch over and over again. You're going to want to make progress quickly, and sometimes if you just need to launch off the pad, if you just need to test something, there's no point in spending a whole lot of time up in the atmosphere when you can just get back down to the surface. So we landed safely. We did our science mid-air, and now we're doing the third set of experiments in where we land. It's always a good idea when you're setting up your experiments to kind of think of your flight path. I knew that I was going to have to do science on the launch pad. I was going to launch up and be in the atmosphere. I wasn't going to get high enough into the atmosphere to gather high atmosphere science, so I would need a place to land, and the place that I was going to land was most likely a completely different area. Like we see here is Kerbin Shores, and so we have there. So when you build in the VAB, it's a good idea to keep your flight path in mind, your mission. But anyways, let's go ahead and do one last crew report because of the fact that we hadn't collected the crew report when we landed until we did our EVA. We didn't want to overwrite the crew report that we did in the atmosphere. But as you see here, we successfully completed launch our first vessel. It says that we haven't gathered the scientific data, but that's because we haven't recovered or transmitted. So once we recover that, then we will see that we have completed the mission. So 36 science is nothing to sneeze at, especially in this early game. We're going to be able to do quite a lot with that. And that is because we utilized as much as we could with an asterisk on there, because there's actually a lot more that we could have gotten in that first grab. But nonetheless, completed the mission. We've got a lot more that we have to offer now. In a career mode playthrough, these missions are not only going to fund the missions that you want to do, but will actually encourage the player to press forward. And if you're not sure what you should be doing next, take a look at these missions and see what they're wanting you to do, and you'll get a better idea. So now let's take a quick look at these missions. Escape the atmosphere is definitely one that we're going to want to grab because that is our next achievable goal. However, Orbit Kerbin here is a little bit of a trap. You're not going to be able to do it in this next flight. It's just we don't have the technology. I just don't feel that. So don't grab that. As you see here, the Hallmark 16 parachute's a pretty good one because you just need to have the parachute on the craft, which we do have. But you need to be at a speed of 70 meters per second. You have to be between those parameters at the same time in order to satisfy it, which is a little more difficult. Testing the decoupler splashdown in the water is a great one because it's pretty easy to get to the water. From the launch pad, you just kind of head over to the right and land pretty easily. We're going to grab that, but not today. Test the Flea solid booster here is basically printing money. If you have any kind of test something at the launch site, anything test at the launch site, it's free money. You can basically put a probe with the part on there, deactivate it so it doesn't do any damage, and then just print, collect. So anytime you see those, that's a great way of getting your program up and running. These focus observational things are more in tune for plane playthroughs, and we can take a look at that at a later episode. I think in the next episode I do want to take a look at some early game planes, but so rather than not having a contract at all, we're going to test the solid flea booster, because we can use that in our rocket, which will take no time at all. We have a ton of science, so I'm going to go ahead and spend it as much as I can before I have to run into a part where I have to choose. And the choice here is between survivability, which gives us heat shields, new science experiment, and parachutes and stuff. Stability, which gives us some decouplers, which are very good, as well as some stability parts. And general rocketry, which gives us our first liquid fuel engine and a better solid rocket booster. All of these are great, but the service bay is primarily what I'm going to want. The heat shield is also pretty good. But ultimately, the press mat barometer is the deciding factor, because when it comes to spending science, if you can spend science on something that will make you even more science, then it will eventually pay for itself. So now we have new parts: a fuel tank, swivel engine, new solid rocket boosters. Nothing there, no new robotics. We have a decoupler, which will be useful later. The service bay, which will keep all of our parts from exploding. We now have a landing gear, so we can start making tiny little landers. Heat shields, so we can recover from space, come through the atmosphere, as well as a radiator to dissipate some of that heat. We now have communication devices, so we can actually transmit signals and science. And now we have 2 extra experiments, so the thermometer and the barometer will both be doing us well. And under parachutes, we now have drogue chutes as well as radial mounted regular parachutes. So we have a lot more opportunities after just that first little launch. This tiny little rocket, this unassuming little craft with less than the amount of solid rocket fuel than it should, was able to get us all that. So rather than creating a completely new craft, I just decided to reuse the capsule. We're going to keep the top parachute on. So now we're going to go ahead and grab a service bay. This is a great part for early game, because you can tuck away all of your heat sensitive items like science experiments, keep them from exploding. You can recover not only the science from them, but the cost as well. If you find that your experiments keep exploding before you can collect the science, definitely get yourself a service bay if you can. So now we can just load it up with what we want. We don't have any batteries to put in here, but I do like to put some batteries as well. But let's go ahead and take our experiments, put them into a two-way symmetry. We're going to tap a few of the WASD keys until we get the right direction we want. We're going to place these mystery goods there, throw in some thermometers, do the same thing with the keys, drop them there, and fit in our barometers there, nice and neat. And so now we have the ability of doing 2 sets of experiments as we go along while craft is going, without having to worry about aerodynamic drag or heat tolerances or anything like that. Remember, you're going to want to remove them from symmetry, but the nice thing about having a two-way symmetry is you only have to do that once. However, I feel like we may want to do a 3-way symmetry for our next mission. I believe that having 3 is good. I feel like we can afford the parts, and so if you can afford a third part of each one of the experiments, this is another way that you can set up your service bay. Do a little bit of clipping here and kind of put those together. We'll go ahead and grab our thermometer. You can just kind of tack it on here. Doesn't matter all that much as long as it fits in there. And put that right there. And so now we have the same kind of service bay, but with 3 times the amount of experiments. But if whatever choice you decide to go with, as long as it works, as long as you have the parts to manage it, then it's all good. So now this is the part that we want to return. All of this, the capsule, the service bay, the heat shield, and the parachute. So we can go ahead and we'll close that. And yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with this design. There's not much else we need to do. Everything else we can get rid of. We're already at 13 parts, which isn't great. That's, you know, almost half of what we can afford for the total rocket, but nonetheless, we will try our best to stay within those parameters. So now I have a couple options. Solid fuel rocket boosters are a desirable choice early game because it's a single part that carries both fuel and engine. So we're actually going to copy and paste these all three. We're gonna have decouplers here. You don't technically need them. There's something called heat staging, but just for the amount of control, I like to have decouplers instead. So we go ahead and put our tail fins on here, and we check our center of mass, center of lift. But as you see here, once we stage off this lower spot, the center of lift goes above the center of mass. So once again, we're going to need to put fins on there. So go ahead and throw fins in, that's good. But as we remove it, yet again, same problem. So just so you know, if you're going to do something like this where you're just going to copy and paste, put the fins on first, get the piece that you want to copy and paste decided perfectly, and then you'll have to do less work that way. Once again, you press and hold Alt and then left click to drag the part to copy. So now we're going to check our staging, which is atrocious, as we see here. We're going to want to have our lower engine fire first, so we're going to go ahead and put that on its own stage there. But then we're going to want the second engine to fire alongside the decoupler that separates the lower engine. So we're going to put that alongside there, so those go at the same time. And we're going to drop that engine, so that one as well. Keep everything nice and aligned. And now you can put the parachute on with the decoupler. I believe the parachute won't deploy until it's safe to do so, but I like to just keep those separated myself. Let's go ahead and name this. This is much better than the Untitled Craft 1. So we're going to name it the Pinhole 1. I like the idea that it just pokes a hole through the curtain space and gets to see what's on the other side. So now we're going to remove our items from their symmetry, and so we can add them to their action groups. So all you got to do is come through there, right click everything, then you can add them. If you didn't set up your action groups, if you didn't set up your game to always allow action groups before you started the game, you're not going to have the ability to do this right now, and you will have to right click the parts either by clipping your camera through the service bay, clicking on them, activating them, or having the service bay opened, right clicking and activating them. However, once you upgrade the VAB for the first time, you will have access to the action group, so it's not something you're going to be without for a very long time. It's just you have to spend the money to upgrade them before you can use it. But nonetheless, here I'm just going to show you, I'm going to put the service bay on the gear action group. So instead of, when I press G to do the landing gear, it will actually toggle the bay doors. You can do nearly anything on almost any action group. So if I wanted to have an experiment happen when I turn the lights on, I could do that. I like to sometimes have lights set for landing to be put on the landing group, the landing gear action group, so that way I can toggle it on as the gear gets toggled. But there we go, we have our craft. I threw some drogue chutes on there at the last moment to slow it down, but all in all, this was a full 30 parts. It just barely scraped the limit of what we could launch, both weight and part limits. So let's go ahead. As we see, we have no science available from doing the crew report, and that's because we've already done it. You can't get, if you've gotten a full amount of science from the piece, you can't get any more. Some science requires some residual reports to be done, but not the crew report. Okay, so with nothing else left to do, let's go ahead and launch. We don't have a very high thrust to weight ratio, but it is, of course, above 1. Therefore, we will be going up. We are fairly straight and level because of our tail fins as well as our SAS being involved. And yeah, there's not really much we're going to do on this flight. All we're going to do is go straight up and down. We staged once the lower solid rocket boosters ran out of fuel, but as you see now, our thrust to weight ratio has nearly doubled and is rising once again. That is because we are a much lighter craft than the first stage had to lift. And then once we drop this amount of weight, the next stage will be an even lighter one from that, which means that we'll push even further. So, yep, 4.5 thrust to weight and climbing. We're actually going to end up building up some heat here. I actually started to get worried we may be going too fast. Our third stage may have been a little overpowered or have too much fuel. Our heat gauges build up, thankfully on the tail fin aspect and not on the crew capsule. But thankfully before anything bad happens, the engine cuts out, stops producing forward thrust, and the heating effect dissipates. And so we are now safely on an upwards trajectory, 65 kilometers above the surface, now passing the 70 kilometer mark, so we are now officially in space. Jebediah is a very happy Kerbal, and we will be getting some good science here. So, and in low space, low altitude above Kerbin, we can go press our action groups, collect all of that science. It's all tucked safely in our service bay. But we're going to go ahead and head back to the astronaut complex at the KSC and go and upgrade it. We're going to check our mission control, see if there's any missions related to an EVA, but if not, we're going to head back. This is essentially what I did in the How Do I Save My Craft when I don't have parachutes part of the last episode, because that is a useful thing to do early on. We took a look at our apoapsis. We have plenty of time to do an EVA walk. Now our first one, first Kerbal in space, first EVA walk. Valentine's going to be so jealous. We're going to go ahead and take that data that has our crew report, and then we're going to do ourselves an EVA report for a significant amount more science than the one on Kerbal's surface. And Jebediah, being the fearless Kerbal that he is, decides to do an actual spacewalk, a suborbital spacewalk. So the dangers are quite high here. He doesn't need to just rendezvous with the craft. He needs to get back aboard before both of them return through the atmosphere, and he has no protection from the heating effects himself. When you're on a suborbital journey, the closer it gets to the apoapsis, the slower it will go, and then the closer it is to the atmosphere, the faster it will go. So if you're already on your downwards journey, you have less and less time to recover the farther you're out. So always be safe on your EVAs. But thankfully we were able to get back in without a problem. We're going to go ahead and time warp our way up to our apoapsis, or at least close enough to it. And then we're going to do our last set of experiments, which will hopefully be in space high. As we see here, it is indeed space high, so that's a new biome on all of them. I did reset them because I wanted to test the landing gear method there to show that indeed you can toggle that. I typically like to have my bay doors open before doing my science experiments, but nonetheless. So yeah, so we can use the gear, either the button up top or the G key, to now toggle our bay doors. You can also use the RCS key, which is R. If you know that you're not going to have RCS on the craft, you can utilize that to toggle something. So you have a lot of options with action groups. It's nice. So now we are wanting to come home. We're going to have to point ourselves retrograde, which was that yellow circle with the line sticking out from it, because we want to have our heat shield take the brunt of the damage of the heating effect as we return through the atmosphere. We just went straight up and down, so we're not too far away from the KSC. So we should get a decent amount of money back from this craft. as long as we can survive the heating effects coming through. It's a pretty ballistic trajectory, which means that the heating effects will be very hot and very fast, but will also dissipate just as soon as it comes on as well. So there we go. Easy enough. Our drogue chutes are safe to deploy. You can tell because they weren't red like our other ones. But now that we have slowed down enough, our main chute is safe to deploy as well. But we're going to wait a little bit. There we go. And so now our drogue chutes have deployed fully, bringing us down to about 30 meters per second, which is actually still pretty fast. This craft is fairly heavy with the amount of science experiments it has and heat shields. We can jettison the heat shield. That does save us a little bit of weight, but it also gets rid of a layer that can be destroyed before the rest of the stuff. But nonetheless, we're just going to wait until our main chute can deploy, and we can slow ourselves down fully. Once we see that we're fully capable of landing, yep, we check our speed. Less than 10 meters per second is typically a good safe landing speed. We are going to possibly break up a piece or two on the inside, but as long as we can survive, as long as our Kerbal can survive, that's the most important thing. Because we're going so slowly, our Kerbal can actually hold on to the outside of the craft and do things like EVA reports. If there's science to grab, the Kerbal can grab that as well. Reset the crew reports, all sorts of stuff. So as long as you're safely coming down with a parachute and you're not going too quickly, then you got plenty of time here. So now Jebediah has done all the crew reports, gotten everything ready, set up the experiments. So now he's landed. Like I mentioned, slight explosion from one of the pieces on the inside, but nothing too dangerous. We're gonna go ahead and do a crew report from Kerbal's Mountains. We can also do an EVA report as well. We can't do a surface sample because we don't have the R&D building set up for that, but eventually we'll be able to do that as well. Get a whole bunch of science from all this. And as you see here, we're close to the foothills of the mountains, and if we had just walked our way over there, we can get ourselves another report. And all places on Kerbin have science to be grabbed, including the KSP. There's a lot to be gotten around there, which is another video that I can make soon, showing you all the places where you can collect some science for early game building. Anyways, let's go ahead and spend. We've got 151. We're going to want these side decouplers. They're very important. Obviously, we need more liquid fuel engines, and we can continue on towards more advanced things. We only have 113.8 science left, and everything now is 45. Meaning that we can only afford ourselves 2 more options, so we do need to think carefully as what we're going to do. I really do want the aviation tab because I would like to start making planes in the next episode, and I think y'all could benefit from learning how to do that. But the science, basic science, is a very promising looking node because of the Science Junior. Gives so much more than any of the experiments that we have thus far. Plus it gives us things like the probe core, Stay Putnik, and not solar panels, communication dishes. But we're gonna grab that. We're also gonna grab this advanced rocketry, which gives us orbital capable engines, and that is going to be our goal for this last launch of the episode. We're gonna accomplish this Orbit Kerbin mission and show how you can do everything within this first day. Let's go ahead. We're going to accept that contract. There's not really any parameters except for the fact that the engine needs to be built. I went to grab test the swivel engine, and I realized that I actually never tested the Flea solid boosters because of the fact that we decided to upgrade our solid rocket boosters that we used. We didn't use the Fleas, we used the other ones. I can't remember where they are. But nonetheless, we can just do a quick launch of that and make up the money, but we're not going to do that now. We are going to upgrade our mission control, however, which allows us to now take 7 contracts. And so we are going to take that swivel and this decoupler testing one, and that actually ends up giving us more money, recuperating some of the costs of upgrading the building because of the fact that those contracts have advances to them. We're also going to upgrade the launch pad. This is a very important thing. A lot of people like to upgrade the VAB first because it allows you to have many more parts added to your craft. However, I like to upgrade the launch pad because it allows you to have bigger crafts and heavier crafts, which means that as long as you can stay within the 30 part count limit, you can use very large solid rocket boosters to push you forward. So I'm going to go ahead and go for that. The top part of our craft is basically all that we need it to be, but we will adjust it a little bit because we don't actually need to recover all these science pieces. It's a lot of money. You know, if we can recover all these experiments, we'll save a lot of money, but sometimes you just want to go for simplicity and just make sure you can get the job done at the sacrifice of reusable parts. So we're actually going to do away with the service bay in favor of just a heat shield, a lighter craft to bring back home, and just dispose of all of our experiments and have our Kerbal be responsible for collecting them before returning back home. So let's get rid of this service bay. As there is no need, we're going to tack on the Science Junior and we're going to add the experiments to the side of it and have our Kerbal collect them via EVA in space. However, we actually find a better solution for that momentarily, so we'll get into that momentarily. So I decide to, rather than try to load up all the experiments all on one side, we are going to just add two-way symmetry, have them both on the sides there, and unfortunately we don't have any ladders for our Kerbal to hold on to, so they will have to do a bit of an actual EVA spacewalk. But the good thing is that we're supposed to be in orbit by that point, meaning that our Kerbal has a much easier chance of surviving. So let's go ahead and put on this part, which is the science experiment collector unit, something along those lines. But essentially it will automatically take the results from all the science experiments and then store them in its box, so when we jettison the lower half, those experiments that we're getting rid of won't contain anything, so everything will be nice and safe with us as we go along. It's a nice addition. So now we can add in the top stage. This is going to be the stage that brings us to orbit. I'm going to actually do these two tanks, and that will be a good amount of fuel. And the engine that will make all of this possible is the Terrier, which was that orbital engine that I mentioned that we unlocked. We're going to go ahead and throw a decoupler on here, as well as some liquid fuel. I'm going to change this to dark color. I like that, the differentiation. And we're just going to go ahead and copy and paste it. We've got quite a few parts to work with, and now that we've upgraded our launch complex, or excuse me, our launch pad, we have 140 tons of weight to work with, so we can indeed load this up with a lot of fuel, heavy engine. As long as we don't go over our parts, we'll be good. So that's a decent size lower stage, but I would like it to have more oomph, more get up and go. So we're going to go ahead and give it some side boosters, which essentially are just copies of the same piece, just one tank shorter. However, we're now 5 parts over budget, so we're going to remove those 4 and then those 2. But now we're still sitting at 29 out of 30. I realize it's not worth it to just have tiny little side boosters, so we're actually going to go for these large solid rocket boosters. So like I mentioned before, fewer parts, still contains the fuel and the engine, so they are great usage for early game travel when you can afford to have the heavy weight of the rocket, of the solid rocket booster. Then you can you can go far with it. So we only have 3 parts available. We do need some tail fins on this, otherwise we will have no control. Thankfully, that gives us 3 parts we needed. Unfortunately, with only 3 tail fins, it wasn't low enough. The center of thrust was still, the center of lift was still above the center of mass with only the 3. So we are unfortunately going to need to have 4 wings on here, which means that we will have to sacrifice a part. This is where the early game struggle comes in, but by having the ability of having 1 parameter taken care of makes things easier. So it was actually a pretty easy fix. I just got rid of 2 fuel tanks. I still feel like we're going to have enough Delta V nonetheless, but that also gave me the ability of adding on second Science Junior, because we've got 2 experiments of each type except for the Science Junior, and that will round us out to 30. So now before we launch, we are going to want to make sure that we have all of our staging correct, which as we see here we absolutely do not. Our solid rocket boosters are launching, and we also want our liquid fuel engine to activate as well. We want our orbital engine to activate when that top part is decoupled, so making sure that your staging is in line is good. I initially have Bob Kerman going to be put into the pilot seat today because this was before I decided to add the secondary Science Junior, and I was going to have him reset the Science Junior in space in order to get the data again. But then I realized I'm taking 2 mystery goos on there, which he can also reset, but we're only grabbing the 2 science, so there's really no point in having him reset only one thing instead of all the different things, utilizing his talents more fully. See, I'm putting the material studies on 2 different action groups to have it run twice, but unless I actually collect it in between and reset it in between, it's just going to overwrite each other. So not exactly ideal, and because of the fact that we can afford an extra part, let's just do that. Let's go ahead and grab ourselves a secondary Science Junior, throw it on there. It is more of a waste. Those are expensive. They're heavy. It does make a challenge to everything, but the idea that we can just have ourselves a pilot up in there, get Jebediah up in orbit, be the first Kerbal in orbit, and not have to worry about resetting anything, well, that'll pay for itself. So we're going to go ahead and put the Science Junior on the action group, finalize our look at everything. 30 out of 30 parts, only 30 tons mass. So now we are ready for the final launch of the episode, and that is to take Jebediah Kerbin Orbital. We're going to go turn our SAS on, our thrust to max. We have a swivel engine here, which is part of our contract to test, and the moment that we launch it, that should satisfy the contract. We'll look at that a little bit later, but it's just that easy to make money sometimes. So we're holding pretty steady, and then at about 200 meters per second, you can do it earlier, but I like to just be a little bit safe on this. We're going to just slowly start tapping the D key, and we're going to pay more attention to this nav ball here in the corner than the actual rocket itself, because of the fact that you can change the view around. Trying to fly by the view of the rocket alone can be a little difficult, so by paying attention to where the nav ball is, you have a very clear idea of where your rocket's going to go. Let's go ahead and hit the spacebar, stage off our side boosters, giving us a little bit more control so we can kind of tip over a little bit farther. We're going to want to get that little yellow circle, which is your prograde marker, to the 45-degree mark, around the 45-kilometer mark of your altitude, and by doing so you'll have a rough estimate of a gravity turn, and this will help you get orbital with a little bit more efficiency than simply pointing straight up and pointing straight to the side. So as you see here, we're at 45 kilometers altitude, and our prograde is at the 45-degree mark, so we're looking pretty good. Running the science in space, high atmosphere, that allows us to collect some residuals. The barometer, I don't think we had. The Science Junior, we definitely didn't have. But bringing up some information right here, I can see that my apoapsis is 125 kilometers, which is in space. And we are currently in space now, so I can get myself ready to circularize. We have a lot of control with our SAS on and the gimbaling of our engine, but as you see here, you can flip out of control. And a little tip, if you're flipping around out of control and you want to settle on one location, hit the period key, and then that will time warp forward, which locks you into position. And then when you hit the comma key, it will revert you back to real time. So now our apoapsis is 125. We don't have maneuvers available. We don't have an exact idea of when we should burn in order to circularize, but we do know that we can do some space here. We can do some science here now that we're in space, but we do want to collect all the science that we have currently, because that includes our crew report, and then so now that allows us to safely do the science without overwriting anything. Not everything is going to be there. The pressure scan, the temperature, the scan, the Mr. Glue is only giving us a little bit, but the Science Junior will pay for the majority of this trip. So now we are closer to the apoapsis of 125 kilometers, but at 120-ish, well, a little bit before 120, we're going to start burning, and burning towards the horizon as flat as possible. And this is going to bring our orbital speed up, and once we achieve a fast enough speed, our periapsis will go into the positive, and we will bring it up out into space, and we will be going fast enough that we'll constantly be falling but never returning. Kind of nice. And it's cool that you can do it so early on, just with the right choice of parts, right choice of build. You can do a lot in Kerbal on day one with good old Jebediah. We've got a little over 1900 delta V and dropping, meters per second delta V and dropping, so we should have enough delta V to circularize. It's just a matter of, did we time it well enough, and will we fall back into the surface before we can. We look at our contracts, like I mentioned before, we satisfied the test the swivel simply by launching. Certain parts need to be tested under different parameters, but when it simply says test an engine at the launch pad, typically if it's within that first stage, then you should have no problem. Well, it needs to be within that first stage. You have to test it on the launch pad. But yeah, as we look at our periapsis down in the lower left-hand corner, we're quickly getting out of the negatives into the positives, past the 40-kilometer mark, and now we are in orbit. 87. We're going to bring that up, round it out to a little bit of 103 by 127 kilometers. But Jebediah, congratulations, you are the first Kerbal in space. You successfully completed the Orbit Kerbin contract, and we can call it a day. However, there is still some science to be done. Show you how you can utilize this in the best way possible. And then once we make our way around the world, we're actually going to bring him on home before we call it a day, because we're going to need him in the next episode to start piloting some planes. Valentina, we got some bigger plans for you, so don't you worry. But right now, I'm going to show you that we can't do another crew report. We've already grabbed the crew report in low space. However, SAS reports change based on what biome you're hovering above. So as you saw there, we were above the highlands and grabbed our EVA report, came back into the pod to drop it off, and then we will go ahead and hop back out of the pod, and hopefully we'll be above a different biome now. As you see here, we're now above the mountains. So we can go ahead and record that, hop back aboard, and then we're just gonna hop back out yet again, do the same process, EVA report. Now we are still above the mountains, so we can go ahead and recycle that. But since we didn't actually take any reports, we can just kind of hang out here for a second until we feel like we might be above a different biome. And there we are, above the grasslands, but we've already grabbed that. No need to wait for that, so I'll just wait a little bit further and just check again. So this is a great way of collecting science, and this is not only above Kerbin, but of any planet, any celestial body in the game. The biomes, each of the biomes produce different EVA reports when you're in space, in low space above it. Not high space above it, it doesn't matter, but low space above it, you can grab it. We're going to go ahead and come around to the other side of the planet so we have a little bit more to look at. And then we're going to start bringing them home. Still is beautiful. Even without all the visual mods, there is still a lot of beauty in this game. It's been a long time since I've played stock, and so it is still is humbling to see that 13, 14-year-old game still looks great. So this is a notable feature on the planet, the crater. I believe the Ahi crater is what it's called. So I'm going to take a second and we're going to see if there's any biomes, any specific biomes that we can find above there. We've got Kerbin's water, which apparently we hadn't done yet. Yeah, let's go ahead and time warp away above that section of the planet. We're going to do a little EVA report. That green line is a communication lines between ground stations, but that is dealing with the comms net, which is a whole other bag of snacks that we will deal with in another episode. But so this is just space just above the water, nothing special here. I'm going to skip forward a little bit, see if those mountains produce anything different, but unfortunately they do not. They're just the same mountains reports that I had before, and there's no need in taking multiples of those because it's just going to be overwritten in the capsule anyways. But the one place that I could have got a new report is the desert, which is that big deserty looking thing right there, the thing that you can visually see that is absolutely different than any other biome that we've been across, you know, the one that you can just use your eyeballs to see. I did not do that. I just sat there, I'm like, okay, well the crater didn't give me anything, so I guess I'm just gonna keep going and completely neglecting that the deserts exist. So that is probably one of the easiest biomes to get from space because you can very easily see that you're above a desert, but I did not. But you can. So now we pointed our rocket retrograde. We had plenty of delta V, over a grand of delta V, and so it takes us no hassle at all to bring our trajectory back down. I'm bringing my trajectory close to the KSC. I do bring it a little too close. You should actually have it pushed out a little bit farther, because once you separate the rocket, you're actually going to lose distance. You're going to land a little bit closer than you had thought. And so when you're trying to do a little bit more precision of a landing without any kind of mods, just know that the planet's rotation and atmospheric drag will be factors needing to be considered, and yeah, you can do it pretty well if you can master those concepts. Here we are now coming into the continent that the KSC is on. It's over there on the front. We're going a little south of it. Once we build up our heating effect, we're going to go ahead and separate so we can regain control of our craft, point our heat shield retrograde, and let that take the brunt of things. And it's between 40 kilometers and 20 kilometers. That's typically where the heat builds up the most, in the high atmosphere. And once you pass through that, once the heat dissipates, you're pretty much safe as long as your parachutes are properly cared for. Speaking of which, it's coming to my notice. I'm starting to notice that we only have drogue chutes on here. I did not replace the top parachute when I took it off to put the science collection experiment on here. I only put drogue chutes on here instead of the actual ones. And then the actual ones would have taken no hassle at all. They're about the same size, they're about the same weight, obviously same number of parts. there was no reason for me to make this big of a mess up. So I strongly implore you that if you're going to reuse a craft, if you're just going to build a new version on top of an old version, to make sure that you pay attention to the parachutes that you have and their capabilities. Because that science experiment collector is much heavier than the storage bay that we had before, so the same kind of weight is now increased, and we never got ourselves below the 10 meters per second, so poor Jebediah will not survive that attempt. Thankfully, we gave ourselves a quick save after coming through the atmosphere, so we are going to do our quick maneuver that we learned in the last episode for when you forget parachutes. But in this action, we didn't forget the parachutes, we just didn't put on good enough ones, and that could be easily fixed by a little bit better testing. But rather than grabbing the science very fast as soon as we can, as soon as we let go on the AVA, we're actually going to wait until our drogue chutes deploy fully, and we're going as slow as we can, because as you see here, even though it's not a full parachute like before, we can safely hold on. We didn't actually lose control of the craft until I decided to let go, and so now we are safely we're full of the science that we grabbed, and we're coming down pretty smoothly. We've got a parachute on board, so when we press the P key, it takes no time at all to regain control. There goes our craft. So, was a tremendous waste of money to do that, but we are coming back with a considerable amount of science, which will unlock a whole lot more parts and capabilities for us. And because it's career mode, there are always more careers to take, more missions to take to regain the funds to do the missions that you want to do. Once you can get tourism missions going, then you can really start raking in the funds if you can create a rocket, a reusable rocket that can just take Kerbals up to places they want to go, and you're just basically printing the money, like I said. Oh, there's the last of our craft. But yeah, in the next episode, I think I am going to do a few more of these early game tutorial things. I was thinking, I'll leave it up to you guys in the comments below. Which would you rather see? Would you rather have an early game plane tutorial, or would you rather have an early game rover tutorial, and I can show you how to maximize the science around the KSC? Let me know in the comments below. Since there is an influx of new players to the KSP community, I do want to do a few more of these early game tutorials, so we will be continuing our regular schedule of RP1 on Wednesdays, and the Janus Project will be on Fridays, but hopefully I can teach y'all a few things on Mondays. But anyways, that is where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more Kerbal. If you did think about subscribing, drop me a like, let me know your thoughts, and I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.